Welcome to the Big Success Show. Today, 6 easy steps to financial freedom. Brought to you by financialfreedomtool.com. Plenty of money for life.
Big Success with the Professor and Mary-Lynn.
Financial freedom. Sound good to you?
Well, of course.
I mean, it should be good, right? What is financial freedom? Well, the cool thing about financial freedom is it's that level where you kind of just don't have to worry about money anymore, right? And you're free to do the things you want to do, free to live the life you want to live.
But is that even possible right now? Everybody with the pandemic, there's a lot of financial hardship. So the idea of financial freedom for a lot of people seems like it's a dream that's slipped away.
Well, it's easier than you might ever imagine, Mary-Lynn.
Really?
And yes, even with the pandemic, the key to financial freedom is that time is on your side when it comes to money. And that's why it's a concept, actually. There's a concept called the time value of money. And we're going to talk a little bit about that here just right now.
So let's say that you want $1 million when you retire at 65, because who doesn't want to be a millionaire? Right?
I know someone who doesn't want to be a millionaire, a multimillionaire.
Oh, there you go. There you go. All
That
right.
would be a decline in value, right?
Right.
So we're going to talk about increasing the value of your portfolio. And so, you probably, many of you want to retire earlier than 65. That's great. We're glad to hear that. But keep listening to what we're going to say. Listen to this example so that you understand the point, because it's really, 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 really important. At 25, all you need to do is invest $10 a day to reach that goal of $1 million by the time you're 65.
That's all you have to do.
$10 a day. That's it.
It sounds so simple, right? It
No.
sounds so small, but
It does. But here's the thing. If you wait 10 years, so if you're 35, before you get started, you're going to have to set aside $22 a day, more than twice as much. But in any case, no matter how old you are,
start today.
yeah, you're a good student, Mary-Lynn.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor.
So in the example we just gave, which, that's $1 million by the time you're 65, we assume that you would earn 8% on your investments. If you can earn more, you can retire earlier. But be careful, because increased returns usually carry higher risks. We'll talk a little bit more about that here just in a bit.
Before we get started on the 6 easy steps to financial freedom, here's a word from our sponsor, financialfreedomtool.com. Plenty of money for life.
How do your personal finances stack up to your neighbors? The new Financial Freedom Tool shows you how your income and expenses compare to other people like you, so that you quickly see how to save more money. Learn more at financialfreedomtool.com.
Today we're talking about 6 easy steps to financial freedom. Before we share those steps, there's one thing that the professor wants to make sure that we're reminded of. What is that?
So it's important that you have a well-defined goal. For example, our goal, in our example, has been to accumulate $1 million by the age of 65.
Yeah.
You see, there's a specific amount and a time frame, right? And we're going to assume some things like, you're able to do this, you have the resource, etc. But the point is, we've at least clearly defined the amount and the date. It's important because that's the only way we can hold our feet to the fire. Now, there's 2 kinds of income, and that's what this is really all about, understanding that there's 2 kinds of income. There's active income. Think about that as money that you make for you working, okay? And then there's passive money, or passive income, which is money working for you. Oh, doesn't that sound better? Yeah, see? So a big success, we kind of think about it this way. It's when your money makes money so you don't have to. Then you're free to do what you want. That's financial freedom.
Yeah, and so now our example, as you just reminded us, our example goal is to have $1 million by the time we're 65. So what's your goal? Let's talk about the 6 steps to get there. Number 1, automatically pay yourself first.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get kind of confused by this concept, and they say, well, of course I pay myself first.
Right, I get the paycheck, I get the deposit, so
yes,
yeah.
But let's talk about this. Do you get the check and you make the deposit, and then you start spending money, and then if there's any money left, you save it? That's paying yourself last.
So what you save and put away is paying yourself first,
right?
Because you're paying toward your future.
Yeah. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you pay yourself first. So in other words, when you get that check, it automatically goes to something, goes to your savings account, goes to an investment account or something that's going to help you save for the future to be financially free.
Right, to make that 1 million by 65.
Yes, exactly right. So the easiest way to do this is set up an automatic deduction from your paycheck or your bank account. And, people always say this, if I don't see the money, I don't even miss it. Like if taxes go up a little bit in a year, we don't miss it typically. And that's what the government knows. Well, guess what? We can play the same game with our own money and it'll help us get ahead.
6 easy steps to financial freedom. Number 2 is purchase with purpose.
Now, we all make spending choices every single day. The question is, do you really need that even bigger TV now?
Of course.
That's what we think, right? That we
well,
can't
maybe.
wait. We can't do without it. Well, if you don't have the cash, don't spend it. That's rule number 1. The second thing is to look at the annual effect of your daily decisions. There's those big things. That's research shows that's one of the main things that throws us off. But then there's those little intermittent expenses that we just kind of habitually spend the money. We get that cup of coffee, that extra nice big cup of coffee out, or we go out for lunch every day, or whatever it may be. We're doing these things, and what breaks us out of them? Well,
right. Well, and we're not saying, hey, don't, because there's been a pushback. Do buy that latte. I mean, don't take the joy and fun out of your life. Look, if that latte really helps you and it's something you look forward to, go for it. Just the goal is try to find, whatever it is, that amount that you need to put in every day for savings. Where can I find an extra $10 every day? And maybe that does require a cut somewhere.
And I do think a lot of people through the pandemic have realized that. How many people you heard say, man, I got a lot of money all of a sudden, because we're not.
As it turns out, I make a pretty darn good cup of coffee myself, so I don't have to go buy that coffee. But so it's just a matter of finding something that maybe you could be doing instead of paying for it.
And as we already saw, $10, as little as $10 when you're 25 can accumulate $1 million portfolio by the time you're 65.
Yeah.
So these little changes can make big differences. And that's big with 2 G's, by the way.
Oh, yes.
So as you see your accounts grow, you're going to be more inspired to save even more. That's the way this works. So keep your financial goals fixed clearly in your mind.
Yeah, and you just kind of illustrated the importance of why we need to have that number and that date, the number and the time, because it really does come into play when you're trying to, when you're about to spend money. It makes you think about, but is that going to help me get what I want? When I want it.
Exactly. Here's another tool, Mary-Lynn. We can also visualize, right? We can visualize the life that we want. Picture that life free of financial worry. How does that make you feel? Take those feelings with you. Now, yes, exactly. So take those feelings with you as you're making your purchasing decisions, and just always be asking myself, is this consistent with the life that I really want? Is this going to help me get to the life I really want? If the answer is yes, then great. I mean, we need to enjoy life now too. But if the answer is no, then don't spend it.
In our show notes today, you'll find a link to a podcast we did about the marshmallow test. That's about, putting off instant gratification.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting read and listen. And then also another resource is our financial freedom tool, because that tool helps you pinpoint places where you can find that $10, $20. It really helps you easily find ways to save more money, and you'll find that link in the show notes too. Moving on to our third step to financial freedom, and that is to own your own home.
Now, this may surprise you, but we can make a pretty good case for renting.
I would agree.
Yeah.
There's, as a homeowner who's gotten socked with some pretty big bills in the past, sometimes I feel like, what in the world was I thinking?
Well, and so here's the deal. Research actually shows that you're better off renting and investing than owning your own home.
So why are we telling people to own their own home then?
Well, because most people have trouble believing this research. They think that buying a home is just kind of seared in our brains from the time we're young adults. The problem here isn't the research. The problem is that most renters never get to the second half of the phrase rent and invest. They only rent.
And invest part.
They rent and they rent and they rent. And by the way, this doesn't just happen to us in housing. This happens to us, in other areas too. But But people rent and rent and rent. They don't rent and invest. We don't have that discipline. And buying a home creates discipline for us. So that's one of the reasons why the net worth of homeowners is much, 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 just hugely greater than the net worth of renters, because we're kind of forced to save money if we buy a house. Whereas if we rent, we can that money goes and it's gone, right? So it's very much related to that first step.
Well, okay, so if you are a homeowner, how do you make sure that you don't become house poor? Because that's possible too.
Well, and as a matter of fact, that's another error, right? It's so easy to become house poor, and I guess just so everybody knows, house poor just means you have a house that consumes so much of your budget that you can't afford to do anything else. I remember, in my much younger days, before I ever really even, I think, met you, Mary-Lynn, there's a group of us, we'd go out to dinner every week or so. And I remember helping a friend of mine move into his brand new house. And, he and his wife were so excited. And I said, well, I guess we'll see you, next Wednesday or whatever night we usually went out. He said, oh, George, he says, we can't afford to do that for 2 years. We can't afford to go out to dinner. And it's like, that's house poor, when your house consumes so much of your income. And housing is the single biggest expense in most of our budgets. So you really have to be careful that you not overbuy and that you end up in a situation where housing is consuming that much of your budget. The research bears out a house is not a great investment. Now, by the way, buying a house to rent to others, that's a different story. We don't have time for that today, but that's a great way to go. But for your personal living space, find a house that helps you meet all your goals, including, like in the example today, the goal of having $1 million by the time you're 65. Review the first couple points if you need to understand how to do that, how to make your goals consistent. Because the thing is, you can buy a house now. You can always trade up when you don't have to worry about money anymore.
That's a good point. All right. So moving on to our fourth easy step to financial freedom, and that is pay off debt.
Now, you've probably heard people say, I want to buy a house because renting is just throwing money away, right? You hear that again and again and again. And we're running with this under the debt theme just because it's kind of flowing from the previous point about owning your own home. Well, here's my question. Why are we so opposed to throwing money away to our landlord, but we think nothing of throwing money away to our banker? Think about it. The mortgage interest they charge you is a rental fee on money. So you're going to pay rent one way or the other. It's just, are you renting a house, or are you renting an apartment or whatever, or are you renting money to buy a house? Okay? There's not really any difference. So point number one, understand that. Okay?
Yeah, that's a great point.
So now, if you're going to have debt, we said that this point is point number 4 is pay off debt. Well, the debt we're really talking about is interest on high interest debt, like credit cards. Okay? We're not really talking about paying off your mortgage early. That's going to come down the road. And there's a lot of factors that once again, beyond the scope of this podcast. So start with one obligation, like the credit card bill with the highest interest rate, let's say. Pay it off. Take the payment you've been making on that and add it to another one. Pay that one off. Eventually, guess what? You have no credit card debt. Don't stop then. Keep making those payments, but make them to yourself. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Make those to yourself, and that's going to jumpstart your future. It's just another secret to reaching your goal to want to retire early.
Today, we're talking about 6 easy steps to financial freedom. Number 5 is to invest wisely. But what if you're not a great investor? How do you make sure that you invest wisely?
We'll give you an easy way to do that, Mary-Lynn. So first thing we want to understand, though, is this concept of risk. We mentioned it earlier, and I said we'd get back to it. Well, a lot of people don't accept enough risk. If you invest too conservatively, it's going to be hard to reach your goal. And people don't understand this, but you actually can go backwards by being too conservative in your investments. You can lose money by being too conservative, believe it or not.
So being risk adverse is risky.
It can be. And it really comes down, once again, beyond the scope of today's podcast, but comes down to inflation and taxes. They can just eat away any money that you may be making if you're ultra conservative. So there's a basic financial principle that says that increased risk generally deserves increased rewards or increased returns. But here's a secret. Time takes away much of the risk. You see this? We're back to that time theme. Time takes away much of that risk. If you're investing money that you don't need for 5 years, your risk is generally less than if you need it in 1 year. Okay.
Right.
If you can live without it for 10 years, your risk is even lower. Once we get to that 10 to 20 year period, we can make investments that are, historically speaking, pretty near not, like people almost never lose money when they're investing properly for 10, 20 years. Okay.
All right. And then another thing that we always hear is about diversify. Don't put everything into, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly, Mary-Lynn. I'm glad you brought that up, because the easiest way to do this answers your first question too, which is if you get a balanced index fund, let me be specific, a balanced no load mutual fund like Vanguard. They're really inexpensive. Their management is really inexpensive. There's no front load. There's no commission or anything like that. So all your money's being put to use. That is the simplest way to invest. And then you just don't touch that money until you've reached your goal of financial freedom.
Okay. Now here we are to our final step, our final easy step to financial freedom. And this is a big one. It's prepare for the unexpected. And George, as we're, coming around here with the pandemic, I've been reading a lot of surveys where people say their number one regret is that they were not prepared for the unexpected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, I guess one of the things we always tell people is to expect the unexpected. So we're going to go beyond that here.
Yeah.
But I mean, it starts with expecting the unexpected because we know it's going to happen. And I'll just give you a good example. Like they say that if you set aside 3% of the value of your home each year for maintenance, you pretty much will always have all the money you need to maintain your home properly. Okay. So there's just a little simple rule of thumb that kind of sets money aside for your
any
your
kind
home,
of an emergency
home care.
thing, or like, when I, just those unexpected things like, oh, the sewer line needs to be replaced, or,
Yes.
suddenly my air conditioning went out. Oh, I got to replace the whole AC unit. So,
Yes.
yeah.
And then also make sure you're insured properly. That's really important. Insurance is also called risk management.
Yes.
So, we tend to we don't really like to talk about insurance too much because it's about catastrophes and death and disability and all that kind of stuff. But the thing is, it's really just, once again, it's managing those risks. And so, for example, one risk that many people overlook is disability. Like, what if I become disabled?
Right.
Do I have insurance to cover that? Stash away that emergency cash reserve. People say 3 to 6 months. It really depends on how your income. Once again, this is beyond the scope of this particular podcast, but I mean, the more erratic your income, the more volatile your income, the more your cash reserve needs to be.
Yeah.
That's when you move up from 3 to 6.
And I do want to say that when it comes to building an emergency stash faster, again, our financial freedom tool really comes into play here, and it really helps because it allows you to really look at your bills, all the bills that you're paying, and find money there that you can start putting away toward your emergency fund.
Exactly right.
Yeah. And we've got that link right here in the show notes.
Now, you're not going to get rich quick with these 6 steps. We don't promise that. But the thing is, they will put you on the road to financial freedom. Enjoy the trip because it leads to big success.
Do you have any questions about our 6 easy steps to financial freedom? We love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out to us. Big Info, that's BIGG info @bigsuccess.com.
And we thank you so much for listening today.
Until next time,
Here's to your big success.
Find big success at biggsuccess.com.